It's the first business day of the week. Welcome to Business Incorporated, coming to you live from Lagos. I am BC Adebayo. On today's program, Mauritius inflation rate reaches 2.9% year-on-year in April. And Africa's biggest gold miner, AngloGold Ashanti, reports a 16% drop in quarterly core profit. Plus, the World Bank approves a $200 million credit for Zambia to improve rural roads in 6 of its 10 provinces. Well, let's get started now, and we begin with the markets here in Africa, where all the numbers are in green at intraday. While the NSE index was trading up 0.31%, the GSC was up 0.1%. The market in Kenya is still trading, but it closed up 0.48% on Thursday. Egypt was up 1.13% at intraday. And in the Middle East, the markets are also looking good at intraday, with the Dubai index higher at 3,391.67. Abu Dhabi was up 0.12% at intraday, and Saudi Arabia's index was also 0.04% higher. Qatar's index rose 0.18% to 9,851.77. And European markets were under pressure during early afternoon trade on Monday as investors reacted to pro-European Union candidate Emmanuel Macron securing a comfortable victory to become the next president of France. Well, let's bring in Conrad Bussen, my colleague in Frankfurt, for more on the markets. Thank you for joining us, Conrad. Well, France has just elected a young 39-year-old President Macron, who is also a former industry and economic affairs minister. What will his presidency mean for business in France, for the EU economy, and of course the markets?
Well, BC, allow me to start off with the markets. After the French leading share index CAC 40 gained more than 8% in the period of time between the first round of the French presidential election on April 23rd and last weekend, and the German DAX here in Frankfurt gained around about 6% during this period of time, the prevailing feeling on the equities markets today is that it's time to take some of those profits off the table, change them into cash. Whether or not the sentiment will remain pro-equity, pro-France, pro-Eurozone depends a lot, of course, on how successful Macron will be in terms of, delivering on his campaign promises. He's been talking about the need of reform for the French labour market, which still is very rigid compared to other labour markets like Germany. He talked about lower corporate taxes. He also is expected to lower the states ratio, which is, the amount of, or the share of GDP, of gross domestic product, that the state has in France. It's relatively high compared to other countries. All this will be playing a role for markets people. In terms of the European Union, of course, Macron has been campaigning with a very strong pro-Euro, pro-EU agenda, which means that it's likely that he will do whatever he can to, bring more unity again into the Union. And that will probably have some impact on the Brexit process as well. Macron is expected to take a tough stance in the Brexit negotiations.
Away from Macron's victory's impact on the markets. Now, we've seen oil wading its way back out of near 2-week sluggishness on Saudi-Russia cutback handshake. Are energy stocks reacting to this new development?
Well, yes, they are. All major oil producers today are demand here in European trading. Of course, this is an immediate reaction to the increase of the oil price we've seen over the weekend. Whether or not, Saudi Arabia and Russia will really manage to convince all the other countries involved to cut production of oil longer than the month of June remains to be seen. The problem is that the effect of the current oil production cuts on the oil price has been limited somewhat, which also, of course, has to do with demand, which has been, lower and weaker than economists had predicted for the beginning of this year. But it also has to do with the fact that the more those oil production cuts manage to help the oil price upwards, the more it helps American oil producers. The number of oil rigs in the US has doubled in the course of last year, and as soon as the oil price is above more or less $50 a barrel, oil rigging and oil production becomes interesting and profitable and competitive again for American oil producers. So it remains to be seen whether they manage to get through with those oil production cuts and what their effect will be.
Well, finally, Conrad, it's the second week in May. Are the first quarter earnings still hot enough to rally the markets?
Well, many people here certainly are hoping so. You know, of the 30 DAX companies, which are the largest listed companies here in Germany, 9 are scheduled to report their earnings this week. And from other countries, we'll be getting huge and hugely important earnings reports as well. From Walt Disney, for example, from Toyota. And so far, the earnings season has been a very strong one. Morgan Stanley says it's been, here in Europe, the strongest and the best earnings season in 10 years. So certainly people here are hoping that the earnings reports coming in this week will, boost the markets a bit further. Still, let's not forget, the German DAX, for example, is trading near a record high. This is uncharted territory for people who try to predict what the DAX will do. Those reports will have to look good in order to give the market another boost, of course.
With DWTV Channels TV financial correspondent in Frankfurt, Corinne Bussen, thanks for those updates there. Well, in the U.S., stock index futures pointed to a flat open today, with investors set to digest more earnings and moves in oil, on top of the news that a pro-European Union candidate had won the French election. Investors will also be keeping a close eye on 2 speeches by Federal Reserve members later today. Cleveland Fed President Loretta Mester is expected to be at the Chicago Council on Global Affairs public breakfast program to weigh in on the topic. But while